Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, and welcome to our brand new video for Star Wars month. In anticipation for the release of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, we are devoting this entire month to all things Star Wars, just general discussions, top 10 lists, battle of the brackets, and today we're bringing you another top 10 list. This is for the top 10 Star Wars spin-off movies we'd love to see. Our last video was on directors we'd like to see take on a Star Wars movie, but we're going for the actual movies on this one. This is just going to be a list of all the films. Some might be a little dumb, some might be taken a little bit more seriously, just the general spin-off films we'd like to see and which stories we'd like to see told in the Star Wars universe. So we're going to go from 10 to 1. George, I believe your 10 pick is first, so what is your movie?
Well, firstly, this is not a robbery of robot chicken. This is my own idea that I came up with the other day. It probably is the only bad film on the list, but it's a film I think everyone wants to see. It's called Dude, Where's My Arm? A title similar to one used in many films. And it stars Dr. Cornelius Evazan.
That's it. And
Ponda Baba, aka the man that loses his arm. And what it does, it's the story of these two stoners, and he wakes up in the morning, similar to The Hangover actually, you could say, and he's realised he's got no arm, and he wants to retrace his steps to find it. And you came up with the idea you could explore how they came to get the death sentence on 12 different systems during this film. So it's this really deep forensic comedy that ultimately end with him returning to the cantina a day later.
Well, actually, like with the whole 12 systems thing, you could totally do that as a TV show as well. Like, just make it like, I think you said like 12 season show where each season we see how he gets the death sentence on each system, culminating in the final scene, which would be the cantina bar scene from this. But I just love the fact how you say that this is the following day when he wakes up and realises he hasn't got an arm. So technically, after he got his arm cut off, he just must have had like a whole evening and like night of just binge drinking in the cantina to try and null the pain.
Exactly. He might have, got up, gone to hospital, paid some credits to sort some people out. He might have had to be on the run from stormtroopers for interfering in Jedi business. You never know what happened until now. It can be explored now that the canon is essentially free to edit. So Kathleen Kennedy, take note. And you can literally just picture it as a Seth Rogen stoner film. I won't lie, they're hilarious. This would genuinely be just the only Star Wars comedy you could probably do.
And I mean, that sketch in Robot Chicken, I mean, I don't want to keep harping on that, but it is one of the best. And even before that, I had so much sympathy for this character of Ponda Baba because it was what is it, Cornelius Evazan? Is it Dr. Cornelius Evazan? And also the fact that he's a doctor, that's really interesting. You could even explore that as well. But he was the one that starts causing shit in the cantina. He was the one that picked the fight with Luke, and then it was his poor mate Ponda Baba that gets his arm cut off when he didn't really do anything. He may have reached for a blaster. We don't really know because it's kind of edited weirdly in the movie. But yeah, no, I'd love to see that.
It's just a sad affair. And I want to know what happened before and after. Well, what happened in their quest, in their journeys together? Did it end with one swift lightsaber stroke on his arm? I don't know. We will never know. Not until they make this film.
I should also say as well, like, I know bits about what is now considered Star Wars Legacies, which was the old expanded universe, which Disney have swept under the rug now and said isn't canon, and they brought in their own one. So I'm sure if I bring up the Wikipedia page, I can read like a whole expansive history about these characters. But as you said, this is fresh ground now. We can do whatever the hell we want. So that would be a great bit of history for two of my favourite Star Wars characters. So we move on to our number 9 pick, which is the Darth Plagueis origin movie. Now, this origin movie will pretty much just be a retelling of the story that Emperor Palpatine tells to Anakin in the Opera House from Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. This is a scene that I'm sure is going to come up. It was a great bit of world building. It was almost like a legend, like a myth. When you just sit down and you listen to Ian McDiarmid deliver this great monologue about the history of Darth Plagueis and his apprentice, who we obviously know is Palpatine. Since then, there was a expanded universe novel that came out. I think it was literally just before Disney took over, so that book in itself is kind of in a weird state of limbo. Like, we don't know whether that's considered legends or if it is canon. I'm not sure, but I want to see the backstory of these characters. I want to see the dynamic between Plagueis and the Emperor, and there's a lot of theories going on at the minute with who Snoke is. Some have said that it's, I've seen Jar Jar. Some have said that it's Mace Windu. Really out there theories for it. But I think the one that I favour the most is that Darth Plagueis, it's going to be revealed that Snoke is Darth Plagueis. And I think that would be a really great way to bridge the prequel trilogy to the new one. And if you're looking at them all in sequence, in chronological order, how do you go one better than the Emperor, which is one of the greatest villains in cinema history? You give us his master. And I think this would be a great film. It could end with the whole moment where Palpatine kills, or supposedly kills, Plagueis in his sleep. You could explore the whole thing of where they kind of immaculately conceived Anakin with the evil force powers they send out into the galaxy. I just think it'd be really interesting and a nice bit of history. And with all these spin-offs coming out of like a Han Solo spin-off movie, which I will argue we don't really need, this one would flesh out some stuff that's told in the prequels, and I think that's a big part of it, because for me a lot of stuff is brought up in the prequels that isn't really given much context if you are watching it outside of the TV shows or the books or the comic books or whatever. So, and I'd just like to see Plagueis on the big screen, and any more with the Emperor. They probably have to cast a younger actor. I don't know who they could get, but someone that matches the hamminess of Ian McDiarmid would definitely be my way to go.
Yeah, and I think with Plagueis, it's interesting ground, because we don't know if his story's over yet. If he's not Snoke, then they can do whatever the hell they want. If he is Snoke, it adds a great backstory to it, which we might find out more about. So it's one of those that I think a lot of people would want to see, given that the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise is literally a meme now online. Everyone just copy and paste the whole story into just small memes to destroy people. So I think it's essentially a story that could be told, and you want to know a bit more. You want to see it vaguely a young Palpatine at some point, but you want to see this so-called Sith Lord, considering they say in episode 1 that they haven't seen the Sith in thousands of years. So it'd be all very behind the scenes-y, interesting stuff going on, rather than outright I'm raising an army to kill X, Y, and Z. So I think it'd be something different in terms of a Sith film.
Yeah, and also with like whole, and I'm not going to harp on the prequels too much, but Revenge of the Sith, one of my biggest criticisms with it is that Anakin's fall to becoming Darth Vader is done really, really quick. So it would be cool to see some actual Sith training. We've seen plenty of Jedi training, but to see some actual Sith training and how they go about the teachings would be really cool. And also now with the canon sort of swept under the rug, I think Plagueis used to be, I think the species was called a Mun, which was the same as our favourite banking clan, San Hill from Attack of the Clones. If Snoke turns out to be Plagueis in the new films or in episode 9 or whatever, they've clearly gone against the pre-established canon with that, and they're changing it up. So just stuff like that, I think it'd be really interesting to look at. Our 8-pick is, again, another prequel origin. It's General Grievous. I kind of went in with this list with the impression, because we've kind of merged our list together, we came up with 5 and merged them together and came up with a 10 list. I went in with the impression of, I want spin-offs that sort of explore areas of the story that are brought up in the main trilogy or in the main saga, but we get no context for it. So, for example, like Rogue One coming out, the Rebel spies are name dropped with Vader in the film and actually in the opening credits, as in the opening crawl of A New Hope. But for me, Grievous was one of those characters where I was just watching the movies. I watched a little bit of the Clone Wars cartoon after the fact, but I think that did come out in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. This was a character who looked amazing, was really cool. I didn't know who the hell he was. He just kind of shows up out of nowhere. And if you are just watching the films on their own, you know, you have Darth Maul, a great villain in the first one, who, according to the movie continuity, is just straight off killed off in the first one. You have Dooku in the second one, and then all of a sudden 3 comes along and you've got a brand new villain with no context or setup for him. And true, like with the Clone Wars TV show, both the 2D one on Cartoon Network and the CGI one, we get a lot more with this character, but again, he just kind of shows up as Grievous in this suit. I want the original origin story, which I guess is now Legends as well, but the one where we learn that he's a Kaleesh warlord. They're kind of like a reptilian, red-skinned alien species, and he gives himself cybernetic implants to make him a better fighter. I think there's a lot you can do with that, and although I don't know all the ins and outs of Grievous, I know there was a great book that came out, I think it was called Labyrinth of Evil, which really explored his origin. I think there was something to do with Yuzang Vongwar or something like that, I don't really know, but it really went into how he became the Grievous we know in Revenge of the Sith, and I think there's a lot you can do with it. You can explore his culture, his homeworld, his personality before that, and his fall into becoming more machine than creature, and there's a lot of parallels you can draw between him and Vader, I think, in terms of that, and I don't know if that was the original intention for the character of Grievous, to allow for that foreshadowing of what Anakin would eventually become in Revenge of the Sith. But I think there's a lot of areas you can go into this character, which then would give more gravitas to his appearance in Revenge of the Sith, as well as the Clone Wars as well. I think we really do need that starting point origin story, whether that's going to be in a novel or a comic book. But I think visually it would be much better served as a live action film.
Yeah, and what I like about Grievous is in the original Clone Wars show that not many people probably know about these days, they not explain his coughing as such. This is a minor gripe, but they have like this little standoff of him and Windu where he like crushes him, which explains the cough in the film, which was a kind of cool nod. And now people think, oh, why is he coughing for? So there's so much they can explore. In the newer Clone Wars show, we got this great episode of the Grievous's lair, and you sort of see these versions of him, like I'm assuming during he was turning into a droid, but it's such an incredible story to tell that he wanted all these cybernetics to make himself a better warrior and stuff like that. And we see he's pretty much not even himself. There's like a few organs here and there. Yeah. The rest of him's completely, it looks like a Dalek, but in Star Wars world. And it's a story that could be explored. Given he was an amazing warrior, you want to see how he rises, how he's scouted to be in sort of the Clone Wars and stuff like that, because he must have had some kind of reputation beforehand, which we also know he does on his home planet. I think it'd be a really interesting story, and there's so much they can do with it. Is it set during the 3 years between 2 and 3, or is it an entirety of a sort of thing? I think it's something that could easily be explored, and it'd be very different to what we've seen in terms of characters before, because there's essentially no one like him. But the parallels of Anakin and Darth Vader could be quite cool as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great point you brought up about that Cartoon Network 2D Clone Wars show that came out, and I'm really, really kind of annoyed that that's not canon anymore, because I would say, although I love the CGI Clone Wars series, it has a lot more misses than hits, I think, but when it hits, it's great, and there's some great character arcs in there. But the 2D one really did completely bridge that gap in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, even to the point where the final shot of that show was the opening shot of Revenge of the Sith. They really linked it into it, and I thought they did a great job with it. And it is a great introduction for General Grievous to that. Again, you really don't go into his history. He just kind of shows up as this anonymous henchman with lightsabers. We learned that he had Jedi training with Count Dooku, which again would be great to see in an origin movie now. Of course, with Sir Christopher Lee passing away, you won't be able to use him. There's just a lot you could do with it. And also, as well, if this is going to be an origin, whether it is going to be set in between 2 and 3, I don't really know. But even like throw Asajj Ventress in there as well, because I know that she was hanging around. She was Dooku's apprentice, wasn't she, at the time? And I'd love to see a live-action version of her as well. So there's really a lot you could throw into this. There's probably even enough there for like a duo of films or even a trilogy, but I just want to see that origin point of Grievous, so that when you watch them in sequence, you have that initial introduction to the character before you go into Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, and it's just something that should be told. And what you said earlier as well, where it's sort of, you get more information on these sort of minor, sort of not characters as such, but like Rogue One, one sentence in the crawl became a 2-hour feature-length film.
Yeah.
It's something that's going to, when you watch that and then you watch episode 4, that's going to add so much more levity to that in the future films. And I feel that that's the point of these Star Wars spin-offs. I'm not the biggest fan of the idea of the Han Solo film, but I'm still hoping for the best, because it could be really good. It's not necessarily the choice they should have gone for, but each of these films should sort of improve upon the experience of watching the episodic films, and I think this would help episode 3 a lot.
Definitely, and this brings us right on to our 7th pick. Very similar vein to what we talked about the Grievous one, giving more introduction to a character that I think really needs it, but one character that I think deserves it a lot more is Darth Maul from Phantom Menace. This was a character that everyone loved, and they loved him really for 2 reasons. 1, he looked cool, and 2, that double-ended lightsaber is just amazing. And that was really it. It was a character entirely based on his look. And I remember seeing this film for the first time, Phantom Menace, when I was 6 years old. It was the first Star Wars movie I ever watched in the cinema. The first Star Wars movie I watched in general, and I loved Darth Maul. I guess it's sort of like today's equivalent of how kids feel towards Kylo Ren. Every time I was drawing this character, I loved, like, on the playground playing as this character. And then when you get older and start to be more critical of these films, and you watch them in terms of like how they were made and the structure and in terms of filmmaking in general, this is really a nothing character. Now, I know since then they've kept him alive. They've given him the robotic legs, which really kind of doesn't make any sense because it wasn't his legs that got cut off, it was his entire lower portion of his torso, so I still don't know how this guy's alive. And although I haven't finished Clone Wars, I have got to the part where Darth Maul has been reintroduced, and they have done a lot more with the character, even more so in Rebels, which again is a series I need to catch up with, but I know that he's made a comeback in that. So they've done some great things with Darth Maul, they've added a lot more to his character, but even still, I would like to see an origin of him before that. Maybe start it off on Dathomir, I think that's the name of the planet, with his brother. You could have Savage Opress in this before he becomes bad, because we see that he is a very protective character, Savage Opress, in the Clone Wars series, and it'd be nice to see Maul get involved with this. Maybe see him running into Sidious and fall into the dark side, or however it went down. See his training, see a lot more about his personality. Why in Phantom Menace does he say, "At last we'll have revenge"? What does he want to revenge? Why is he invested in this? There's a lot more to this character I think they haven't touched on. And again, they may do this with comic books or his own novel. I think they did a comic book actually of Darth Maul, but I think it was set during the Clone Wars still. There's just so much potential to this character. And as we said, I think these spin-offs should be sort of like a patch-up job to some of the shortcomings of George Lucas with the prequels, or just other areas in general throughout the saga. And I think the biggest one, arguably, is Darth Maul. And he's just an amazing character. He looks incredible. His fighting style's amazing. You could even bring Ray Park back, because I know that he said he'd love to come back and play the character. He's still got all the moves. He's a great martial artist. Met him at Celebration. He's a great guy. I'd love to see him come back to this role.
Yeah, and when we were at Celebration and we saw him, he's still in physical shape.
Oh, hell yeah.
He said himself he could still do it if he needed to. It would be really cool to see. I'm going to go back to the old Clone Wars to reference again, but there was this bit where Dooku chooses his apprentice, where they kind of have like a sort of battle royale. And I'd love to see something similar with Darth Maul demonstrating how good he is. I like the reference to the newer Clone Wars again. I'm not the biggest fan of them Weird Witch people, the Night Sisters.
Yeah.
However, they get a nice story arc if you haven't seen it, but also you could still go to Dathomir. It'd just be interesting because he's a character that could have a backstory. And you know, you look at films like Mad Max, Dread as such. You don't have to have a protagonist that talks too much. They could keep him very quiet as well, and sort of let the performers do the talking, which would suit him because he isn't someone that should have too much dialogue. And what I loved is the voice of him was done by Peter. I can never pronounce his surname.
Serafinowicz.
Yeah, really funny English. Does a lot of comedic work. If you look at some of the old music videos, the trailers, there's so much more Darth Maul dialogue that they cut out. You could bring him back because if you look at his Donald Trump videos, he's very funny still. And again, the setup is there, and it's just a character that should be shown because we don't need anything post Episode 1. This is because a lot of common people think Darth Maul is dead. However, only the fans of the modern expanded universe via Clone Wars and Rebels know that he's alive, and I feel that they will finish his story arc in Rebels. So it's best to explore pre-Episode 1, I think, and again, that'd add a lot more levity to what you'd be seeing in Episode 1.
Yeah, definitely, and I like what you brought up there about the, I think it was a teaser trailer, wasn't it, for Phantom Menace that had this whole, it was a great monologue from Darth Maul, and we really wanted to hear that in the movie, and sadly I don't know if it was ever recorded for the movie, or if it was cut, or if there was a lot more originally to the Maul character they didn't put in the movie. Not quite sure on the reasoning. I was trying to find the monologue here, but I can't find it. It's probably on YouTube, the original trailer with him anyway. It's just a shame what they did to the character ultimately, but you know, he's making ground now in the cartoon series. It'd just be nice to see that come to fruition in a live action one. But that takes us on to our next pick now. Now, I will be honest, before I get to this one, I don't know a whole lot about this one. I never played the PC game, but our sixth pick is an Old Republic movie. I know the game itself has a massive following. I've seen some of the CGI trailers on there. As far as I know, it's set like thousands and thousands of years before Phantom Menace and really explores the origin of this clash between the Sith and the Jedi, I believe. You could even turn this into a trilogy, I think, and compare it with another trilogy like Lord of the Rings, how you have those three movies, how you get to the third one, it ultimately culminates in that huge battle, essentially for the entire fate of the world. You could really do that with this one as well. You could introduce a lot of new characters, a lot of history, and even with the new canon, now they've wiped most of it out and talk about Legends, there's this whole chunk of history that hasn't been explored pre-Phantom Menace. I think so far in the new canon, Phantom Menace is kind of like the origin of everything. So there's a lot they need to explore again with, like, when we had over 30 years of continuity before that. And I think the Old Republic's the best way to do it. Again, linking in with dialogue from films that doesn't really get established in Phantom Menace, where we learn that for over 1,000 generations, isn't it? That's A New Hope. But I know there's some line with Mace Windu or Yoda towards the end of that movie that point to what happened before, with Sidious and Darth Maul as well, where they say, we'll have revenge. This is what they could be revenging from the fate of this. As I say, I don't know much about this game. I haven't played it myself because I'm not a PC gamer, but I think in terms of the wealth of history there, this is probably just right for making a Star Wars film about it, or even a trilogy.
And what I like about this is that it should be a trilogy because there's so much story to tell. And if you think about Disney's sort of structure of what they're intending to do with the new Star Wars films, I think it's one of those where they could give themselves, finish episode 9, do a spin-off, then you can commence a new trilogy. Because we know they're not going to do episodes 10, 11, 12, not for at least 20 years.
Yeah.
And I've got a feeling that they're going to keep doing trilogies to a degree. Not necessarily keep, but I've got a feeling they've got a plan, and I'd be very shocked if this wasn't a part of it, given that due to Clone Wars there is canon with some names. I mean, I'm similar to you. I haven't played the game. I know there's Knights of the Republic. I know there's the Old Republic, which is the MMO online thing. So they've covered it quite a lot in Lucas's time, and it's something they can take ideas from, because they've always said, although they're legends, they're taking ideas. We've seen Thrawn come back on Rebels. We've seen sort of one of the Sith masks is very similar to Kylo Ren's. Kylo Ren is supposedly a relic hunter. You could even tie that into episode 7 with that little reference there. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a story that could be explored, and it would be a stunning story to tell. As long as they nail it right, if they can go back to the older settings of, you don't have to set up Coruscant and all this Jedi stuff. They've got so much freedom that they can do film sets as well. It wouldn't have to CGI Coruscant into it. That could be something that happened in 1,000 years we don't need to know about. But it's a story. There's so much potential there, and it does create so much of the dynamic for the Sith. Because knowing about the Old Republic might give Sith intentions more of a backstory rather than just we're evil for the sake of it.
Yeah, and how you were talking about the trilogies there and how they've split it. We look at the history of Star Wars, how it was, 1977, 1980, 83, and then it wasn't until 1999 where we get a new trilogy. So there was a big gap there, and then a big gap between, Episode 3 and Force Awakens. So I think they should do something similar in terms of their actual episodic numbered stories. And I think this would be a great placeholder. Now, we have another pick on our list, which I'm not going to give away yet, but that is another story that they could potentially turn into a trilogy. Whether they do that one before this one, I'm not sure, but I think even if you just think of spectacle as well, like I've seen the CGI trailers for this. If you just literally type in Old Republic cinematic trailer, you'll find it. It's almost like I could watch a movie like that. It's great stuff, and just seeing like an entire army of Jedi. And I know we've kind of seen that before in Attack of the Clones in the Gladiator Pit in and Geonosis, but this would be like for the fate of the world, and this would be epic, and we'd get to see so many Jedi on screen together fighting for something that actually has meaning, like they'd have a motive this time. So I'd love to see that. That takes us on to our next pick, which is 5, which was one of your picks, George. So what is your 5 pick?
This is a Clone Wars film in the sense, nothing to do with the TV series. I had this idea, not similar to Rogue One, but it kind of is. You could picture a battle from the Clone Wars, essentially. And the way I kind of pitched this, I covered the director first. You mentioned that you'd love to see Nolan do another war film and kind of Star Wars on our other list.
Yeah.
And that kind of had me whirling some brain. And I came up with the idea that if you had sort of a unit of clone troopers who have either crash landed or ended up in a sort of droid, not base as such, but you could essentially pitch a gritty, outright brutal war film involving one small batch of clone soldiers against an entire legion of droids. I think it would be incredible to see how that could appear on screen. I know it's quite limited in terms of story, but they could do a lot of developing characters. You could even use clone characters we know from the Clone Wars, such as Commander Cody, giving them their film debuts, Captain Rex, another name. And ultimately, it would just be demonstrating how brutal these Clone Wars are, because in the way, if you look at the original trilogy, how they talk of the Clone Wars is very similar to World War II in the sense that everyone was involved. It was brutal. There was a lot of stuff going on, and it ended up creating what we live in now, which World War II kind of did do. So it would just be an example of something that's happened, and I think it would be very interesting to see what they do. It could finish with them with a Jedi turning up who they've been waiting for to help command a mission or anything like that. But I just feel that a gritty, darker war film would give a lot more levity, and it would also make the clones feel more like people than CGI armies.
Yeah, definitely, and that's a great point. That's what I wanted to bring up, because although Clone Wars really helped out with this, and we're talking about the positives of the Clone Wars TV series, they really do give great personality, camaraderie, and just bond between these clone troopers who we know eventually become evil with Order 66, but you really connect with this team of soldiers. And some of my favourite episodes in the Clone Wars, I mean, I can't remember the names of the episodes themselves, but my favourite ones are the ones that do tend to focus just on the clone troopers. There's a great story arc with, I think it was Jedi Master Krell, who turns out to be an evil Jedi, a dark Jedi who is sent to command these troops when Anakin has to be sent on another mission. I think he has to head back to Coruscant, and he's basically leading all these troops to their deaths in these really, like, completely outnumbered situations where they have no hope, and it's the Clone Wars, it's the clone troopers trying to, you know, go against Krell, go against their orders and think about their men. And I think in terms of a gritty war film, say if Nolan was to direct it, that would be incredible stuff. Now, I didn't know if there was anything really else to explore in the Clone Wars, because we do have the TV show. But again, if we're going by the films where the film fans probably haven't seen Clone Wars or don't know the ins and outs of it, then I think it would be a great opportunity. And you're right, when we do watch the movies, you kind of have faceless droids against emotionless and characterless clone troopers. So there's no stakes to the actual Clone Wars that are happening. So if we do get a film like this, it wouldn't be much, and it wouldn't detract from the shortcomings of the prequel trilogy itself, but I think it would greatly add to it. Like, I know there was when George Lucas special editioned the prequels. Now, he didn't add loads of changes into it, it was just a small few tweaks here and there. One of the ones he did in Revenge of the Sith was when you see the clone troopers rappelling down onto Utapau, and when you see them getting, you know, shot by the droids, he added voices and shouting as they were dying and as they were rappelling, which, it's a small change, but it does give you that, especially because they're CGI as well, it gives you that sense you're not just watching a video game, like, these are people behind the suits. And I think a film like this, if done right, if focusing maybe just on like a really small group of them, if you make it like Saving Private Ryan or something like that, or Full Metal Jacket, like the ending of that film, I think you could have some really interesting stuff here. You could even have flashbacks as well to the training on Kamino, because that was another story arc I loved in the Clone Wars. There's a lot you could do with it, and it'd be nice to, as you said, like with like Rex or Cody, bringing these characters we know from other material into it. I think it could be done really well, and like the possibility of introducing other characters in it. Maybe you could see Ahsoka Tano in it really briefly with Anakin, or I don't know. The opportunities really are endless with this one.
And because it's a story on itself, you could even have someone like Grievous, which we spoke of earlier.
Yeah,
he could be leading their attack. It could be like the very original 2D Clone Wars, where you just see the scene where he just brutally destroys everyone. Because it's a story, it is essentially a Star Wars story. That's what they're calling these films. They have the freedom to explore whatever the hell they feel like doing. They can have new characters and kill them, or that might happen in Rogue One, we don't know yet. And they could use some survive, blah blah blah. And I think it would just give an insight into the films. We'd also finally get real Clone Wars armor as well.
Yeah.
That sounds so bizarre, but that is because not one single clone costume was made during the filming of the 2 and 3, which is extraordinary to believe still. Which is a shame, because the design of the Episode 7 Stormtroopers, some of the new Rogue One stuff, would have looked absolutely amazing on some of the clone designs, which would look a lot better on screen than they do now, because they are aging. But I feel like it's a story that should be told, and there's freedom to explore it however they want to, because it's one small battle in a 3-year war. It's Star Wars.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd love to see that. Get some more clones in there with real armor. That'd be amazing. And you talked about sort of like the freedom of storytelling, which moves us on to our number 4 pick. One pick of a very similar one, which will feature later down in the list. But this, for me, was one of my picks. It's a bounty hunter movie featuring Boba Fett, set post Episode 6. Boba Fett is a great character, and although like his history is really gone into with Attack of the Clones, where we learned that he was the son of Jango Fett and he's a clone himself, the fact that they removed Jason Wingreen's voice from the theatrical cut of Empire and replaced it with Tamara Morrison's voice, I guess we're meant to imply that he is still that same character that Daniel Logan played in Attack of the Clones, because there was some theories out there how Boba Fett could also... I don't know if it's Boba Fett, Boba Fett. I'm probably going to flip between the two, so just bear with me on this. But I've heard theories out there that, you know, it's almost like a mantle, like the helmet and the armor could be passed to anyone and they could become that character. It doesn't necessarily have to be the clone that we saw in Attack of the Clones, but I think that we're meant to imply that it is now. And his unceremonious end in Return of the Jedi, where he is kind of just backhanded with that staff of Han Solo, he goes flying through the air like a cartoon character, falls into the Sarlacc pit, and George Lucas has just got rid of one of everyone's favourite Star Wars characters and the most influential and the most infamous. He doesn't deserve that fate, and I know that the expanded universe, again, I didn't read much into it, featured him climbing out of the pit. I don't think he could be digested with his armour or something like that, which really doesn't make sense when you have loads of other Jabba's cronies thrown in there that are also in armour. I want to see Boba Fett climbing out of this pit and wanting to get revenge on the people that put him there. I also had the idea of, because I love all the other bounty hunters as well, one of my favourite moments in Empire is that one shot where Vader is recruiting them all to go after them, and you just see these great character designs and droid designs. So I want to see Dengar back. I want to see Zuckuss and IG-88 and 4-LOM. I want all of them back. Even some new ones as well, because it doesn't have to be complete and utter fan service, but we're meant to infer that these are the best bounty hunters in the galaxy. Now, you could have Boba Fett going on this rampage mission, and maybe in order to calm him down, someone hires other bounty hunters to take down Boba Fett and finish the job. So you could have him on the run from all these other bounty hunters whilst he's also going on his own mission as well. You could have him try to get revenge on the Jedi themselves, Luke Skywalker. I'm really not sure. I didn't really think much about the plot in all honesty, but I definitely do want a Boba Fett movie that could be set after. You could even have it where, you know, Boba Fett is dead, maybe the armor's been coughed out, and we have a new character that comes along that puts on the armor. I think a big part of it, though, is that we don't see the person behind the armor. I think that would really, really cheapen the character. It should just be someone in armor all the way through the movie, kind of how Gwendolyn Christie was with Captain Phasma, and just maintain that element of mystery. I know the mystery is essentially gone now with Attack of the Clones and what we get revealed in that, but just more Slave One, more Boba Fett, and I would be really happy with that.
It would be interesting. I'd love to see some of the bounty hunters, given that post episode 5 they are very much cult figures now. Yeah. Even on the new Battlefront game, they've made Bosk and Dengar DLC, and they've given them a bit of a persona. Clone Wars explored some of these. I think Simon Pegg voiced Dengar in it, and it worked. There's genuinely a lot of potential in a sort of bounty hunter film, and everyone wants to see more Boba Fett. Everyone knew Josh Trank was working on a Boba Fett film when he got sacked. For all we know, that 2020 spin-off film I think it's probably going to be a Boba Fett film as well, and they're probably just going to try and get a new director for it. It's one of those that there is more stories to tell, and he's got such a big following, not even amongst Star Wars fans. Normal people can recognise the Boba Fett mask, and they can tell you it's Boba Fett or something. You're that guy from Star Wars, and he's a recognisable cult hero, so he's someone that should be explored a lot more on the big screen.
Yeah, and I mean, with Daniel Logan in Attack of the Clones, it's kind of put it in a weird situation now where we can't really have an origin movie of Boba Fett because we ultimately know his origin, which has taken away a lot of the mystery. So I think going about it this way, make it like, you know, a man with no name situation, Clint Eastwood from the Spaghetti Western trilogy, the Dollars trilogy. Very, very little dialogue from him. Make it all visual. You could have standoffs between him and other bounty hunters. And how Star Wars, when it originally came out in 1977, it did bring in a lot of those spaghetti western elements into it. I mean, Han in the bar, the cantina bar itself, the whole Greedo situation, and the look of the town itself. On Tatooine, for example, there's a lot of spaghetti western elements in there, and I think you could do the same with Boba Fett. You could make him that silent, stoic badass. The armor basically says everything. You just look at that guy and you know he's a force to be reckoned with. And as I said, I don't really know what story I'd go for. I just know that I'd want it set after Episode 6 to clear up some of the shortcomings of the other films, and one of the biggest ones of the original trilogy, which a lot of people say is untouchable. Some people say that Return of the Jedi is the weakest. I wouldn't agree with that, but one of the biggest parts is how quickly Boba Fett is got rid of in that movie, and I think this would correct that. It would please the fans as well to know that he's back, and also it would retain that mystery of what's left of the character moving on. So that moves on to our third pick. which is a very interesting one. This was another one of my picks. This is an Obi-Wan and Anakin training movie. I think that all Star Wars fans will agree that one of the biggest problems with Attack of the Clones in terms of its time jump is that it skipped out all of the interesting stuff and the character development of things we should have seen between Obi-Wan and Anakin in the most important years of his life. We see him as a little 9-year-old boy in Phantom Menace, and we fast forward 10 years later and we only get mild references as to what they got up to. Haven't seen you this on edge since we fell into that nest of Gundarks. We can now see that in this movie. We can see moments like that. And it'd be really interesting. You could see, obviously they can't cast Jake Lloyd now, and I wouldn't want them to, and I wouldn't want them to cast Hayden Christensen because of how much he's aged since then. So you could definitely get a new actor. I think Ewan McGregor could still pull it off, in all honesty, if you do something with his hair or shorten his beard to make him look a bit younger than how he does in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. I think you could still do it, and how Clone Wars came along and set in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith really just beefed up that friendship between them. So if you do watch Attack of the Clones, watch the Clone Wars series and then Revenge of the Sith. I've never done that, and it would take ages to do, but I think it would have some knock-on effect to it when you get to that, and you'd believe the friendship a little bit more with the help of that TV show. I think a film would do exactly the same for this one. We could see these two characters bonding. We could see Anakin training. We could see him start to be tempted towards the dark side, maybe. Like it's ingrained in him from that point. There's just a lot you could do with it, and how some of the training elements of Empire Strikes Back were some of the best bits of that film with Yoda and Luke. We could see a parallel between that, and we get more Ewan McGregor, which is always a great thing because he was one of the standouts. He was probably the biggest standout alongside Ian McDiarmid in the prequel trilogy. And just to see him, have a little bit more to do, have a character, see him take up the role of Master. Because, his master Qui-Gon Jinn is almost like freshly dead, essentially, and he's having to take that on himself. He was a Padawan himself, so he's having to become a leader. It wouldn't just be great for Anakin, it'd also be great for Obi-Wan. I think there's a lot you could do with that and really sort of like blossom their friendship and that student-mentor figure between the two.
Yeah, and I think with the sort of training one, I know Marvel's in a comic series on it, which I haven't read, but there is so much to explore. There's a 10-year gap. It doesn't even have to be a film, like we said earlier, a sort of Netflix show for one of the picks. You could do something similar in the vein, showing aspects of their life. There's so much to explore there. Granted, we don't know. I'd assume there'd be no Sith or anything like that, so it'd be very much it'd be character-focused pieces. It doesn't have to be big, brooding. You can still do your normal Star Wars action. Why is Anakin the best pilot in the world? I saw him race a vehicle when he was 10. Surely by the age of 19 he's been doing some proper Starship stuff. Again, it's something which can be explored, and again, Star Wars is new. They might even have to be on a mission to take out a bounty hunter, something like that. You can interweave it with other stories from the Star Wars universe. Everyone's favourite Dexter Jettster could have a cameo.
See that would be great, because we know that he has a history with Obi-Wan. Like, I'd be cool with that.
Exactly, and there's a lot they can do. He hasn't seen Padme in 10 years. Don't need to worry about Natalie Portman coming back.
Yep.
He thinks about her every day. Maybe he's got a photo frame with her in it in his bedroom or something. We don't know. It's creepy, that relationship. But
he
I
could
think
keep that little necklace thing that he made for her.
She's got it.
Oh, he gives... Yeah, that's right. Sorry, he gives it, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, but no, and you're right, because he shades of the dark side. It'd be very interesting to see what he does with Obi-Wan, because in episode 2 their sort of relationship is he's a whiny, pathetic student. Do we want to see more of that? I don't know, but maybe we can see why he's so whiny. They can develop it, because by the time it gets to episode 3 he's obviously been in a war and he's got some personal shit going on, whereas this could be outright Jedi business, and he could even get some cool little cameos by people like Yoda.
Yeah, and I really want it all just to be like Karate Kid, with like Mr. Miyagi just training up Daniel's son. Like, you could really do that. And how in that movie, I don't know if you've seen the original Karate Kid, where, he's teaching him all these techniques which seem like really pointless, like he's telling him to wax the car, wax on, wax off, paint the fence, everything like that, and he thinks that this is pointless, and then ultimately he sees that in practice that it is actually working for him. You could see that impatient quality to Anakin. And I mean, when you go back and watch Phantom Menace, let's be honest, Anakin feels like a completely different character, that movie, to the one we get in Attack of the Clones. So it'd be nice to see that transition, smooth it out a little bit more, see it from the perspective of like a couple of years after we see Jake Lloyd at the end of Phantom Menace, moving in with a new actor, bring a little bit of that darkness in, not too much because you don't want to spoil it too much, but I know that a lot of fans were really disappointed. Some like the ones that grew up with the older films and went to see Phantom Menace, they wanted an actor who did have that haunted quality to him so that it was more believable that this kid would eventually become Darth Vader. And you really don't get that with Jake Lloyd. Not blaming him as an actor at all, you know, he was just a kid actor. He showed up to set with his lines, did what he had to do. I blame George Lucas for that in casting him in the first place out of all the people they had on offer. But no, I think out of all the sort of like time jumps between Star Wars, that's really the one that needs filling in the most. Like they keep doing like all the Clone Wars stuff, and now in between 3 and 4 as well with Rebels and such, which again is a big time jump, and I think that does need filling in, but they're neglecting the between the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones stuff, and I would love to see some more Obi-Wan training up Anakin. I think that's really good. So we move on to our number 2 pick, which was your one. Kind of a similar one to that came before, but with a big difference in this one. So George, what is your number 2 pick?
Mine is a Boba Fett film set between episodes 3 and 4. And the reason this differs is I've got a very different opinion of how he goes in episode 6. I love the cowardly not cowardly ending, but the comedic ending of Boba Fett. I love the fact the biggest bounty hunter in the world with the best reputation got absolutely humiliated. I want to see a film not similar to Dread in the sense that he doesn't take his helm off for the duration of it.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, we've seen that work. Captain Phasma, it works with her, although she got minimum screen time. I want to see a film of not necessarily him. It's kind of like a day in the life of, similar to Dread, that it's one sort of story arc from a day. However, you can make it personal, whereas not necessarily equaling to yours, but I would love to see, for instance, Boba Fett on a mission by the Empire about maybe a Jedi that's believed to have survived Order 66. Okay, there's Inquisitors at this point, if you're going to get technical. However, I would love to see a bounty hunter take down a Jedi. It doesn't have to be a recognisable Jedi. If they wanted to be cheap and boring, they'd put Mace Windu in it, because Samuel Jackson is desperate to return, but that would also lessen his death, which I love as well. But I just want to see a film Boba Fett doing his thing, and ultimately ending with him incinerating someone, so you get the famous Darth Vader line, you know, no incineration.
Disintegrations. That's
the one. I got that mixed up then. But I think a Boba Fett film would be cool. We'd see why he has the reputation he does. Would there be another bounty hunter in it? I don't know. You could introduce someone like Cad Bane, have him killed by Boba Fett.
Oh my god, yes. Get Cad Bane in these movies, please.
Just do something between episodes 3 and 4 with him kind of in his prime, working for the Empire. There's little bits in canon between episodes 4 and 5 which don't need to be explored, but I want to see how he came to work for them, how they always go back to him. And it would be really cool and quite unique. And I thought of Matthew Vaughn. You mentioned the other day he's seen as Tarantino, and I think the way his action scenes would work, I haven't thought about directors on all of them, but it was just in my head. I thought if you look at sort of Kick-Ass and Kingsman, he's got this really interesting sort of action technique he does. If you look at the sort of the scene in Kick-Ass 1 with Big Daddy in the warehouse, you could picture a guy in a Boba Fett costume doing something like that, wiping
with like
out
the jump cuts.
Not necessarily jump cuts, but just a one-man wrecking crew type thing, just taking out everyone. I'd love to see a very interesting Boba Fett take on this, and he'd be someone I think could do a really good job with it. And I think Boba Fett is one of the inevitable choices of a spin-off film. But yeah, just him taking out a Jedi, it'd be absolutely incredible.
And I mean, setting it in between 3 and 4 is a really interesting place to set it, because for me with Boba Fett, I just think, oh yeah, how he ended, like I want to see after that. But it's interesting going back to this point, because I am watching Clone Wars and I don't know if Boba Fett's going to crop back up in it or not. I've seen a few episodes where he tries to assassinate Mace Windu, which is a great bit of character development, especially when you know that Mace Windu just completely, in your phrase, savage Jango Fett, where he just decapitates him straight out. You get one of my favourite shots from the prequels, actually, where you get Boba Fett picking up the helmet of his dad. Great foreshadowing there, really, really ominous, although I always do think, like, why doesn't Jango's head just, like, plop out of the helmet onto the floor? And there's a few other episodes as well where we see he's kind of been taken in by a band of bounty hunters. I think, is it Bosk is involved with him, I think, and Aura Singh. I'd love to see more of Aura Singh. We get like a blink and you'll miss it cameo from her in Phantom Menace during the pod race. You could even have elements of that as well. I mean, it'd be a 3-year time jump, wouldn't it, from that? So, you know, there'd still be room for it, absolutely. Actually, no, I'm thinking of 2 and 3, aren't I? Ignore what I just said. The 20 years gap, but you could still have him being with that band of bounty hunters, them kind of grooming him and helping him become the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy. Whether he'd be going down hunting the Jedi, I don't know. But another thing you could bring in as well, especially with Rogue One introducing Vader, you could have him meeting up with Vader and setting up that sort of like bond they have. Because even with Empire, where we have no context of this character before that, you do get that sense that Vader and Boba have had this kind of history together, like maybe he's used him on other things. And there's that great theory on the internet about the whole no disintegrations line, where Boba Fett was the one who was sent to Tatooine to kill ultimately kill Luke, but kill Luke's aunt and uncle. And when we see them like just charred bodies, that was the disintegrations, because we never see the stormtroopers do anything like that. Even with blaster rifles, they say that don't they say something like only Imperial stormtroopers are this accurate to shoot the sandcrawler down? We know that they're not that accurate, really, so that could again be Boba Fett. It'd be a nice way to bring him into it, I think, and show him, you know. And you could even have his flamethrowers. Maybe he disintegrated them that way with his flamethrowers, I don't know. But you could have Vader sending him on this mission. You could have a little bit with Vader as well, where maybe we start to see that change in him, where he kind of regrets it because they are his family. I don't know, there's a lot to it, so it's an interesting point setting it in between 3 and 4, but I still think any point with Boba Fett is a great time to set it, because there's a lot to his character that we don't really know yet. And whether you want to retain some of that a mystery, I don't know, but I think that more or less goes for the identity, which has kind of been ruined a little bit now. So just go for it, just flesh this character out, because some of my favourite episodes involved young Boba in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, and he's just a character that's awesome. I want to see him in action. I want to see him killing people, sort of just doing what he does, because even in Clone Wars, he's a kind of a whiny kid. I'm not trying to spoil it if people haven't seen all of his story arcs, but he'll do some really cool stuff, but then he'll just start moaning about the fact that, you know, he's getting used by other bounty hunters for this, that and the other. I would just love to see him just outright being this badass that he's turned into. I mean, given that Jango Fett is the best bounty hunter in the world at the time, and Boba Fett supposedly echoes him, I would sort of love to see how they do that. And I'd love to see if he ever turned that suit green, or if it is just mold.
Yeah,
rust.
yeah. No, I've always wondered that too.
Because I love the Jango Fett costume, but I prefer Jango's to Boba's, but I do really like Boba Fett's. But again, it's just any story can involve Boba. It's similar to that Clone Wars I mentioned earlier, because Boba Fett's done dozens, probably hundreds and thousands of bounty hunter missions, whereas the same with Clone Wars, there's so much you can show with it. And I'd like to see him in his prime doing some badass Boba Fett stuff, giving him a bit of backstory leading up to... Even use a young Han Solo if need be for 1 or 2 scenes. Han Solo recognise him straight away when they meet. Is there an exchange before? I don't know, but we do currently have a Han Solo on a multiple picture deal. I don't think they'd do that, but there's so much to explore with him. It would be a waste not to do it.
Yeah, and just before we move on to number 1, you were talking about you want to see Boba Fett killing people. Would you have this as the first 15 rated Star Wars movie? Because I think you kind of have to, right? I mean, if you're going to do Boba Fett justice, you need to up the rating.
No, I'd keep it to 12. I think Star Wars can go very brutal and keep it at 12A. We saw it in The Dark Knight. Implied violence is the best kind. Brackets for people that want to make money. I don't know. I think you could do it as a 12. I like a 15, 18, but I don't think it would feel right for Star Wars to get like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I was just thinking with, you know, how brutal it can be, but even thinking about Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith, where we see Anakin burning, and it's so realistic how he is burning. It's just horrific to watch. I remember at the time, like, dads were having to shield their kids' faces when they were seeing this movie in the theatre, so I guess you could do the same with Boba Fett. But now we move on to our number 1 pick, and this was a joint decision. We both agreed this was the spin-off movie we want to see the most. Spin-off movies, or like a trilogy, whatever. We want to get an Obi-Wan movie. Now, I think we're both in agreement that we want to see this set in between 3 and 4, in the 19 to 20 years that he spends on Tatooine, because how Revenge of the Sith ends, we're kind of meant to imply that, you know, he just posts up in his little hut and just sort of like watched Luke grow up and just kept an eye on him. And that's it. But there's got to be more to Obi-Wan. There's got to be more to the story, especially with how... And this has always been weird for me, especially with the prequel trilogy coming along, but how you had this huge intergalactic war, of which was the Clone Wars, and then all of a sudden, fast forward like 19 years later, it feels like a myth. Like, no one really remembers it. It's always talked about like it's really, really far in the past. It'd be really weird, like, you know, World War II happening and then no one remembering it 20 years after. So there's a lot more to it there. I want to see Obi-Wan dealing with the fallout. Surely he didn't just hide away. Surely he still had some involvement. And other things we get, like I know at the time there was meant to be a Qui-Gon Jinn cameo at the end, so that it really fleshes out that bit where Yoda says that Qui-Gon's come back, how to commune with him, I will teach you. He was meant to feature there, but I don't know if he was going through something at that time or if he was busy with another film or something like that. He couldn't feature in it. This would be your chance to do it, and if you're going to make him like a Force ghost, it'd be great to get Liam Neeson back into it again. I loved Liam Neeson in Phantom Menace. There really wasn't that much to his character, I didn't think, but in terms of how he played it, I'd love to see him back. You could have an interesting dynamic there. You could have Obi-Wan saying, I did what you told me to do, Qui-Gon. You told me to train this boy and look what's happened. So there's all elements of that, but the story itself, I really don't know what you could do. You could bring Darth Maul back. You could have it as almost like that revenge story. It'd be a good way to bring Darth Maul back to the audience who still think he's dead. Obi-Wan at this point could still think that he's dead. Actually, does he have any run-in with him in the Clone Wars? I'm not sure. I haven't got that far yet, so that kind of ruined that. But anyway, you could have him having another fight with him, perhaps. Try to get revenge for Qui-Gon, keeping an eye on Luke, and it'd just be an interesting bridge movie, taking it from the tone of Revenge of the Sith more towards A New Hope and smoothing that out. And that's kind of looks what Rogue One's going to do. We're getting Bail Organa back in this, some great connective tissue between the two trilogies, and I'd love to see the same with Obi-Wan. And I mean, Ewan McGregor, we're both in agreement, was probably one of the best things in the prequels. He was fantastic in all three. He was enthusiastic in all of them, and we can kind of tell that as the CGI got more pronounced in the other two, he perhaps didn't have the greatest time on set, but I think under a new direction with Disney, Kathleen Kennedy, everyone behind it, maybe even get him to direct it himself with his new film that's coming out called American Pastoral, which I've seen a trailer for and I really like the look of that one. It's interesting, and we know he's had discussions. There's a great interview with Collider. If you type in like Ewan McGregor Collider interview, he's very coy about it, but you can tell that he's definitely been in some kind of negotiations or chat with Kathleen Kennedy or the producers over there at Disney.
Yeah, and I think the whole of the Ewan McGregor stuff, he's absolutely buzzing to do it. He wants to, more the fact there's meetings, he's already had a role in the new Disney universe. He voiced some dialogue in The Force Awakens if you missed it. For myself, I'm expecting the name drop of Obi-Wan Kenobi when I watch Rogue One. I'm assuming Bail Organa is going to tell Leia or whoever's got the plans to make sure you get its Tatooine to a guy called Ben Kenobi. There we go, that's just on the head one little nod that could happen. Infinite possibilities. He's a character that's so well known. No one dislikes Ewan McGregor's performance of him. If I found someone, I'd be very shocked that they did. Everyone seems to enjoy his story arc. Would you have Darth Maul there? It's a possibility, like you said. There's so much to do in the Marvel comics. Before I start reading them, there was this great one where Luke got Obi-Wan's journal, and he was sort of talking about how impossible life has been since the sort of Order 66, you could say. He's took upon the name Ben for a start. He hasn't got his lightsaber. He's got to resist to reveal himself to the world. It would be a character drama, and ultimately not like a retirement film, but would you get to a situation where he has to, for the best of him, get his lightsaber out and do some shit? Could there be some Imperials that have heard upon rumours of a young Jedi on Tatooine or heard of him? There could be bounty hunter connections. Like I said with Boba Fett, Cad Bane, I'm going to name drop him again because I'd love to see him. Cad Bane knows who Obi-Wan is. There's some cool Clone Wars stuff. Boba Fett could do something, you never know, but he's a character that if they create the right story, there's no reason to go to him. I can understand that, oh yeah, but if he's got his lightsaber, they'll know of him. It's 19 years, and he hasn't sat in that cave for 19 years. I'd be very shocked if he stayed on Tatooine for 19 years too. He might have gone up to the stars and seen a few different sort of, not rebellions, but he might have helped the rebels with something at some point. It's an unknown chapter. All we know is that he essentially watched over Luke in the background, because even Luke just goes, oh, you mean Ben Kenobi? Could we even get a younger Luke appear for a minute or two? We don't know. But Ewan McGregor deserves some more screen time, and he deserves a better production for his Star Wars films.
Yeah, completely agree, and it's kind of heartbreaking because although he was enthusiastic with all of them, but when you see him in behind the scenes footage of Phantom Menace, he's like a kid at Christmas, like choosing which lightsaber he wants, doing all these stunts and the choreography for the lightsaber fights, like he's completely into it. But as you watch him in interviews as he goes on, you hit like Revenge of the Sith, he's really just like, yeah, okay, like, I played Obi-Wan in that movie, and it's kind of sad to see how he became that way with like the whole production and things. But you're right, with more practical effects, like actually on location, and him just having a greater focus on it really to develop his character even more, I think it's a great opportunity. We talk about all the other characters, like there's been rumours that they want to do a Yoda origin movie. I don't need that. I want the mystery of Yoda to remain intact because it just plays to his character. Boba Fett's an interesting one, but the one I want to see the most is definitely Obi-Wan, because he's just a fantastic character. But yeah, so I've pretty much said everything I can on the Obi-Wan spin-off and all the other spin-offs in general. If you have, we'll close out.
Yeah, there's a lot more than 10 Star Wars films they could make.
God, yeah.
And I'd be very shocked if they make less than 10 films, or less than 20.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how Disney do the break, because I mean, at the minute we've got an episode number spin-off, episode number spin-off, episode number, but we still don't know what that spin-off is going to be after episode 9, and then what their plans are going to be after that. I bet we'll get that probably after episode 8, or maybe after the Han Solo spin-off movie. They're clearly going to keep us updated, but this is a franchise, and the fan base is always going to be there. Just, we've been through the ups and downs of Star Wars, and the fans are still there. Even now, we experienced that at Celebration. It's a shame we can't go next year, because we'd get a lot more stuff on episode 8. But yeah, I mean, I'm not against the spin-offs at the minute. I'm sure I'll get to a stage eventually where we have like about 3 Star Wars films a year, kind of like the Marvel movies, where every time that Star Wars opening crawl goes up, I just kind of roll my eyes like, here we go again. Almost like C-3PO in, or is it Return of the Jedi he says that, or Empire Strikes Back? I can't remember. But yeah, no, interesting time, great time to be a Star Wars fan, and yeah, so that will do it for our top 10 list of the Star Wars spin-offs we'd most like to see. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know which spin-off you'd like to see. Is it one on our list? If you can give us any more information about the things like Old Republic or anything we didn't touch on, please do that in the comments. So get involved, spread the word, all that good stuff, a lot more stuff coming out, more reactions to trailers from me, more movie reviews, and as always, you can expect more Star Wars content from us this month. So that'll do it for our video today, and until the next one, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.